Former Governor Haley Barbour recognized for all that he did to help South Mississippi recover and rebuild following Hurricane Katrina 20 years ago.
Yeah, Barbour called on Mississippians to hitch up your britches and get to work, and a lot of us did that. That leadership motivated many when we were surrounded by all that destruction.
Barbour is credited with getting federal help here after Katrina wiped out so much of our community, and we welcome Governor Haley Barbour here to the show at WLOX. And it's always good to see you here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And it's hard to believe 20 years later, we just talked about that famous quote you had there. But when you came in today and you look out there at what the coast is today, what are you thinking?
Well, it reminds me that I said then that the coast was going to come back bigger and better than ever. And it has. It's interesting to me. In 3 years, the coast counties had this population back to what it was when the storm hit. New Orleans still doesn't. I honestly believe that our response to Katrina, particularly of the people of Mississippi and the way they were strong, resilient, self-reliant people, did more to improve Mississippi's image than anything in my lifetime.
I was here I was doing sports back then, Governor, and then we all go into storm mode when we get a hurricane. So we were in storm mode after that for 4 or 5 months, I guess. But yeah, you were talking about the image of our state really was helped by the way people responded. You'd have famous people coming here. I met a few stars and celebrities that come down to help, and they were all like, wow, look at the progress and how nice everybody was. And that speaks volumes on the character of people, not only here in this part of the state, all over Mississippi. Because if I remember correctly, after the storm, something like 80% of the state was without electricity. Granted, we took the brunt here, but there were other problems north of here. So it was a statewide thing, even though, of course, the coast was hit really hard.
Well, the coast was decimated, but you're right. It wasn't just a coastal calamity. Mm-hmm. We had hurricane force winds at West Point, north of Columbus. A third of the fatalities, by God's grace, we only had 238 fatalities, but a third of them weren't on the coast. They were as far north as Jackson and Meridian.
See, I didn't even realize that, because in the aftermath, we're hearing everything, and a lot of that you don't find out until later on. That's amazing, but it doesn't surprise me because it was just a monster.
Well, it was, and it was a reminder to people around the country. This was the worst natural disaster in American history at the time that it struck 20 years ago. And I said then it was fitting that the worst disaster in American history would bring out the most volunteerism, the most giving, the most charity, and it did. We had almost 1 million people who came here and volunteered to work in the first 5 years after the storm, 600,000 in the first year. And they came from all over the country. And they came down here to help people they didn't know. And I can't tell you how many people told me who came and volunteered, Governor, I feel like I've gotten more out of this for myself than the good I've done for the people I came here to work for. But the people are so nice that I've come to work for and so grateful.
Yeah, and maybe a lot of them came back later on. We've seen a large growth in people moving here and choosing to make it their home from the north and other places, and it's become sort of an attractive retirement community.
Well, it is for a lot of reasons other than the hurricane. But one of the things that I saw in the 5 years after the hurricane, people coming back who would introduce themselves, and they were from Kansas Highway Patrol, or they were from the Indiana Wildlife and Fish, and they would tell me, I got to sit down here by my state the week after Katrina or the month after Katrina, and it was such a great experience. I wanted my children to have the chance to see what it's like to do good for people you don't know, and they are so grateful for it. That happened to me time and time.
Yeah, well, that's a
and
good
time
story.
again.
And you've got a lot of those stories in your book here, now published 10 years ago during the 10-year anniversary. What is your message when you're going around and you're talking about the Katrina and the impacts? You've been talking about it here just a little bit. When you're talking to these groups, what is your message for the people?
Well, we did suffer through the worst natural disaster in American history, but it brought out the best in us. My mother used to say to my two older brothers and me, crisis and catastrophe don't create character, they reveal character. The character's already there, but this is what brings it out. And it was good for our people to see this, for whether they worked at Ingalls Shipyard or Stennis Space Center or WLOX. We saw the best of people in Mississippi. My wife used to talk about one of her first experiences. Marcia came down to the coast 70 of the 90 days after the storm.
Yeah, I remember she was here a lot. Yeah.
She was the face that said that the state government cared. But she talked about she had two highway patrolmen with her, and she was always looking for baby stuff to give to over around Kill. And they came around the curve, and there's a double wide trailer that just smashed flat. Marcia said it looked like a beer can that somebody had squeezed in her hand. And in the front yard's a man and two little tykes. So she pulls over them, spotted some babies. And they started giving them stuff, and the man said after a little bit, that's enough for us, that's enough. And one of the highway patrolmen said, well, look, we got plenty, don't worry. She said, well, if you got plenty, there's a little old lady across the road who's a shut-in. Take it to her. And Mike Cooper, the highway patrolman, laughed and said, well, it's okay, we'll get her. He said, well, if you got more than that, the husband said, if you go down the road here about a quarter of a mile, there's a sharp turn, gravel road back to the right, and there's 6 families down there, and I know nobody has found them.
Yeah. So many people needed that.
I thought to myself, good God, how can these people not prosper and survive and be strong and come back bigger and better than ever? And that's exactly what happened because of the Barksdale Commission, because of the leadership you had on the ground here. Just I can remember
so many players.
Yeah.
It really was. It really was. It was a team effort, absolutely. Those 2 or 3 weeks, really the months we were after the storm, that was one of those, it didn't matter what you did, news, sports, weather, here, we felt like we were journaling. And it was an experience I'll never forget. It was like, wow, this is why I did this job, just for this, and I think it was like that for everybody, government, whatever, didn't matter.
Well, and the results paid off.
Yeah, and we see that today, certainly. The results really did.